Hey guys, my name is Joannie Caraballo and I am a bilingual teacher to a nearby surrounding district. I am actually naturally a Puerto Rican from the island of Puerto Rico. I was born and raised there. Both of my parents are actually natives of New York. They were both born and raised there, and they actually did a reverse migration to the island of Puerto Rico. And it was actually really difficult at first, having Puerto Rican parents who were raised in the States, because culturally it is really different to live in an island where you have parents that are considered to be New Yorkers or New Ricans, because the culture is very different. Puerto Rican culture in the States is different than Puerto Rican culture in Puerto Rico. Words are different, things that are eaten are different, the way that we celebrate holidays are different. So being in Puerto Rico and having parents that were not from the island per se was a challenge on its own. So when I lived in Puerto Rico, I had my family who spoke Spanglish at the time, and I didn't learn how to speak English until I went into the fourth grade. Up until that time, I actually went to a private Spanish school, and the reason why I had not learned English was because my dad was actually in the military. He was a military soldier. He was in special forces, and for personal reasons, he believed that our mother should not teach us English because he was against all things that the U.S. represented. And so once my mother separated or parted ways from him, she became a immigration officer at that time, which now is represented by the agency Customs and Border Protection. And at that time, she went off to Atlanta, Georgia, past the FLETC Academy. And we went to a Department of Defense school. And when I say we, it was my sisters. I have two younger sisters. And so my two younger sisters attended from first grade and second grade. And I attended that school from fourth grade to up to graduating high school. And so I went in as just as an English language learner. My background was listening to my mom and my uncle speak English all the time. And so I would listen and I would be so excited to listen to the language. And I wanted to learn it actually. So it was a really interesting and exciting experience for me to be able to go into an environment where I actually had the opportunity to learn it. And so my first experience going into a military base and having a friend correct me. I was going into this crowd and I was not scared. I was actually going into this big crowd and I was going around making up Spanish to English words, saying permis, because in Spanish you say permiso. And so I'm going around saying permis, and my friend taps me on the shoulder and she's like, hey, it's actually excuse me. So, we became best friends. We still talk to each other. And so at that point, I fell in love with the English language. I fell in love with the American culture per se, even though I was already living a more Americanized Puerto Rican culture. So I left my home when I was 17 years old, joined the military. I was in the Air Force briefly, came to the States. And so it was still a cultural shock because living in the States and being a Puerto Rican from the island and coming, like I said, from New Rican parents, which is the terminology that is used for Puerto Ricans who are born in New York, is very different because you feel like an outsider because you're not really considered Puerto Rican because you were not born in the island. So I thought I was Puerto Rican because I was born in the island. But there was, like I mentioned before, a lot of the differences within the culture. And so a lot of the cultural shocks that I felt coming into the States was more from my own community of Hispanics because I was not like them. And so it was nice coming into the States and being able to hear Spanish. At first, it was nice to hear just Spanish in general. And so that's where I would hear the differences between Spanish that Mexicans spoke or any other Hispanic groups that I would hear. And so I really didn't grow up in an environment where color was an issue, because in Puerto Rico, you have Puerto Ricans that are white, yellow, brown, black. It doesn't really matter. We're just all Puerto Ricans because our culture, our mix is made up of Africans, Arawak Indian, which is Taino, and Spaniards, which are considered the more whiter Puerto Ricans. And so in our culture, there is racism within our culture, which would be ignorant for me to not include that in this video and omit it and not say that there isn't, because there is. And so, but my home was, we weren't raised like that. So I really wasn't really aware of racism up until I actually came to the States and I was called a brown person. I really didn't see myself as a brown person until I had to really choose that I was Hispanic, and then I had to fill in a box and say that I was either white or brown. It was like, I'm just Puerto Rican. Can I just be Puerto Rican, please? And so coming into a classroom as a bilingual teacher, in education, I feel like I can relate to my students, and I like to take my personal experiences and be able to think about how I felt learning the language, but also how I feel. I try not to think about myself as an outsider. I mean, I think that if you go in life thinking as yourself as an outsider, or thinking as yourself, like maybe as the victim, then for myself, I feel like I wouldn't get that far in life. So I really don't care about how people see me. I just hold myself to my own standard. So I try to teach my kids in the classroom that you have to want the best for yourself. So in that, and in that mindset, I really compare myself to myself. And I have no limitations for myself. So whatever I don't know, I learn. I've been blessed enough that I have a mom who, she was a first generation student, graduate. She did not earn her bachelor's until she was almost, I want to say probably well into her 40s. And she obtained her master's almost 60 years old. So I had that example in my life, and I didn't limit myself. It took me almost 16 years to actually earn my bachelor's degree. And so right after, I wanted to earn my master's degree because I felt like it took me long enough. An advantage that I want to say I have, because it took me all that time, was that I don't feel that lost in technology. So I feel blessed that I had all that time at school, as opposed to maybe a teacher who almost graduated 20 something years ago and is a well-seasoned teacher, which I appreciate all that knowledge, but maybe may be feeling a little bit lost with technology. But going back to my students, I can say that I feel a special kind of connection because I had to learn English just like them. So in my classroom culture, I always try to create a safe environment in which I teach them that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not pronounce a word correctly. That's what we're here for. We're here to learn from each other. I mean, just the other day, I had to get a tooth extracted. I mean, the other day meaning like maybe a couple years ago, and that completely changed the way that I had pronounced words. So I had to relearn to pronounce words. So whenever a student makes a mistake, we have that one rule that, hey, this is a family. We don't laugh at each other. So creating a safe culture is important for me and for my students. So I encourage you to create a classroom culture that it's a safe place to be able to talk about things that are uncomfortable. Things that are uncomfortable to talk about is racism. It truly is an uncomfortable subject, and we tend to think that if we don't talk about it, then we're not racist. But in reality, those things do happen. And I have gone through situations in which I've been told comments that have made me feel very uncomfortable. And because I didn't want to get into uncomfortable situations, I didn't say anything back to the person. And then I felt like I actually contributed to the situation instead of correcting it. I've been told comments such as, oh, so you mean to tell me that bilingual students score higher than our students? And so, sometimes, yes, bilingual students can score higher than other students. I mean, it can happen, just like African American students can score higher than Caucasian students, and Caucasian students can score higher. I mean, it does happen, and it has nothing to do with one race being greater than the other. And so, those are conversations that we need to have in times like this. And so, being a Puerto Rican in the States doesn't really it defines who I am. As far as culture is very important to me. I have taught my kids how to speak Spanish because it is important to me to identify myself as a Hispanic. I know that culturally, back in the days, certain families have, and that's something that I have respected as well. They have made a choice not to teach their kids Spanish because they feel like if they teach their kids Spanish, their kids would be looked down upon. But I feel like being able to speak a second language is definitely a blessing. It's definitely something good. I feel like if you think about it from a educational perspective, that's a part of your brain that has definitely been developed, and that's more brain power to you, right? So being Puerto Rican to me, it definitely means definitely taxation without representation. It means that we're American citizens, but we're limited to a lot of things that maybe being an American citizen from a state inland is different politically. But as a Puerto Rican in the States, I can honestly say that being a bilingual teacher, I have been blessed to be able to connect with my students and to be able to say that, I was born in a place where I was taught Spanish as a first language, but I was also able to learn a second language. And even though it may have been a struggle because there is no transparency in the language and it was difficult, I was able to learn it. And I was in fourth grade. And I can honestly say that if you have the desire to learn something, you will learn it no matter what the age is. I can speak from a testimony point of view. When I first interviewed for my teaching job, I was going in wholeheartedly wanting to go as an ELAR, SLAR position as a bilingual teacher. My background is reading, writing. I love it. And that's what I thought I was going to do. I thought that's what God wanted me to do, right? And so my sister at the time was actually in Puerto Rico. The island had just been hit with Hurricane Maria. And her house had actually been really impacted by the hurricane. And she was working at a university. They were still being called to work, and they had no power, but they still had to show up to work. And so at that time, I had told the principal that was interviewing me, because there was two positions at the same grade level, and I had told him, if you're interested, my sister, she's also a college professor and has a master's degree with English as a second language, and if you're interested in doing a Skype interview, she's available. And so he said yes, but guess what happened? I did not get hired for the reading SLAR position. I actually got hired for math. And I was so scared. I was like, oh my God, this is not what what I had in my heart. I mean, I had bought all these things. I was prepared to do this thing that I thought that I wanted to do. But let me tell you this. I say all that to say that when God has a plan for you, he will definitely see you through it. And my first year, my first week, actually, I cried internally. I'm not going to lie to you, but I reached out to great people who helped me. I found great mentors that helped me. And I actually even won an award for one of the high scores within the district. And glory be to God. I mean, that was not in my power. And I can honestly say that when God has something for you, like I said before, he definitely will have your back. So I will leave you with that thought. I will let you know that having a safe classroom culture, having classroom management in which you have a relationship with your students is definitely something necessary. It's good to take the time. I know people will tell you, at first, don't smile, don't do this. Don't. It's about a balance that you have to have. Definitely, pray for your students, pray for yourself, definitely. But take time to learn who your students are. because it is important. So I hope that this video is helpful. Again, my name is Joannie Caraballo, and I'm actually a student in the doctorate program now. And I hope that this is a blessing, and I will keep you in my prayers, and I hope that you guys keep me in yours. Have a good one.